My name is Ben Clark, and I'm the Managing Director of Deland Contemporary. And it's my privilege to welcome you today to the gallery. Obviously, we are here meeting on Kulin Nation, and I wanted to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri mob and their elders past, present and emerging. And of course, welcome our really, really special guests. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa, who's going to tell us a little bit more around, I guess, the work that you've been doing in relation to this show before handing over to the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. I'm really just here to introduce our incredible special speakers. So before you want to hear any more from me, I just want to introduce our special guest today, Jane Gimme, who is Yubina Nampijin's daughter and also the director of Warlayirti Artists, and also one of the first directors of Warlayirti Artists. She's travelled here today with her niece and grandniece, Rikisha and Lydia, and Poppy Lever, who is the Arts Centre manager currently and who's been there since 2018. And they spend a lot of time going out bush, 3 or 4 major bush trips a year. And of course, Professor John Cardy, who's the head of the head of humanities at the South Australian Museum. Thank you so much. I'm just going to pass it over to our guests today. So thank you so much.
It's really special, I think, to sit here with Poppy and Jane and the family of Yubina. And we'll come to talk about why this is such an important room and why it's so special to be surrounded by these works a little later in the talk. But I think it's interesting when Vanessa was talking about the impact that the Balgo show had in Sydney. And it's funny, I've spent 20 years working with Balgo mob, 20 years looking at Balgo paintings, and I'm always slightly surprised when people are surprised, you know? It doesn't surprise me because Sydney people don't know anything about, where the good stuff came from. But Balgo art has been a foundational school of art in Australian painting, and I say Australian painting, not simply Aboriginal art, for 40 years. And Australian art would not look as it does today without Undabai's mum, but without her husband and without the men and the women that you see in the rooms behind us. In the late 1980s, when Balgo began as a formal... I won't go into the huge backstory of Balgo because there's more beautiful things to talk about in this room today and more important people to hear from. But Balgo begins in the early 1980s and then it has a few halting starts and doesn't have a structure in which for the artists to fully express their ambitions until 1987 when Warlayirti Artists begins. And people began painting at that time because they wanted to recreate their own autonomy, their own cultural logic and economy in a world that had been radically transformed in the decades preceding, where desert people, Yubina, and the kids, and all of the families were walking around in the desert leading their lives when some of you were kids. And walked into Balgo and made their lives there and refashioned the whole desert world in this little town called Balgo from all corners of the Western Desert. And that radically transformed desert life. There was a mission, there were government constraints, there were religious issues around all of that. There were dormitories where kids were separated from their parents. And there was the corrosion of the traditional structures of family life and economies. And the artists in the early 1980s, when they reclaimed the community from the mission, the first thing that people did, those elders and leaders who took over Balgo, was start painting. And so we've seen what our family are doing at Papunya, we've seen what our family are doing at Yuendamu, and we want to paint too. And we're going to become the bosses of our own world by doing that. But we're also going to share it. It's an incredibly generous and beautiful thing that people did with that intention to share country, to recreate it, to teach your kids and your grandkids about that country far to the south by painting it for them there in Balgo. Because your kids and your grandkids were going to grow up in a place that wasn't their country or that was a different country. And if you understand country and what it is as not merely a place, but as the expansion of yourself into all of the relations before you and behind you in time. Country is not a landscape. Country is other people. Country is your world. So when people paint their country for us, it's an incredible gift, an incredible act of revelation. And this has been going on for 40 years, but in the late 1980s, everyone was doing it in brown and white and black and red because they assumed from Papunya Tula that those were the colours that were traditional in the desert, that they were the traditional colours, that those ochre palette. And the first arts managers at Balgo, with all best intentions, thought, oh, well, we should only use these colours. And you can see a couple of these paintings. You can see Brandy, you can see Jumpo, some of these old men starting out with this ochre palette. But that room back there, or those couple of rooms, reveal to you what we owe Balgo artists. Because they reveal to you as soon as, it was Michael Ray who came to the 35th birthday celebrations last week. Oh, when was that? 2 weeks ago?
I've lost track of time.
We don't know what day it is. Poppy and I are about to this is the last thing any of us are doing for this year. September, we're out. As soon as Michael Ray arrives in 1989, he goes, well, I don't know that you should only be using black, white, yellow, red. What do you guys think? And all the artists just went, whoomp. Where's the green? Where's the hot pink? Where's the purple? Where's the blue? Where's the... Balgo mob just went nuts, painting what they wanted to paint, painting the colours that were around them in the world. Perfectly traditional colours, if you've ever seen a sunset in Balgo. Psychedelic purple, hot pink, blue, green, the 18 different shades of spinifex green that you get when the light is just so in the morning. They're all traditional colours. And Balgo artists were the first ones to just paint. I think you look at people painting from Warlayirti side in the early 80s, people at Papunya, there's still this formula, there's still this compositions, and there's still this palette that is bound to some idea that each of those schools has subsequently broken out of. But it was Balgo painters who broke the mould before anyone. They broke all the moulds. Like every single kind of painting you can imagine happened in Balgo before it happened at most other places. And you see that in that room. And you also see, and it's not just about colour, you know, it's about so much more than that. It's about the freedom and maybe even a little bit of competitiveness, you know, between these different family groups, Warlayirti, Nadi, Wangka, Kukaja, Manjaljara, Walmajari, did I say? There's lots. Bindubi. All these different artists from all these different parts of the country who are painting their country but in Balgo. And you don't want to be painting like your neighbour. You don't want to be painting another person's country. It has to be different. So Balgo creates this melting pot of creativity. But it also creates this incredible atelier of family lines of painters. And Undabai, Jane here is one of the great expressions of that, where kids and grandkids and husbands and wives sit together and create country together. Because country is other people. The whole idea of an artist just out there by themselves, you know, meditating in the desert and the spinifex is rubbish. You know, people paint together. It's social. It's about reproducing the lines of your world. And I think that's what you see in what happened in the early 90s. The legacy of that is still flowing on in the generations of painters that Poppy's going to talk about soon, where you create apprenticeships and you create cultural and artistic apprenticeships through these art centres and through the practice of painting at Warlayirti artists that pass through time. And it's not merely artistic, this is a cultural transition as well. You know, and I know I used to sit and watch Yubina paint. In fact, it's mainly what I did for 3 years. I would just sit there and Jane would laugh at me and Yubina and I would try and talk to each other in Gugaja and my terrible Gugaja, and she didn't really bother with English, did she? She's just like, she understood English perfectly, but never bothered to speak it because she didn't need to. She knew exactly where her world was and where her values were and where her people were. And she didn't need to speak English to anyone to have them completely and utterly transformed by her presence. I've never met a human being on anything like Yubina on this planet. She raised half of Balgo, you know. She's a mother for everyone. You know, I remember Chopper Helicopter saying, "Oh, Yubina's mother for everyone." I was like, how many kids does Yubina have? No, she's just mother for everyone. And I felt that too. I mean, she was my grandmother in that structural way in the desert, and I felt that relationship really deeply. You know, she used to pull out little bits of food for me from my handbag if she thought I was hungry. She'd ask me to go and make her cups of tea or get her a bit of tobacco, and she'd come and hunt me out every weekend to take her hunting, which I loved, often with bye-bye. But all Yubina ever wanted to do was hunt. She just loved being on country. She loved walking. She loved singing. She loved hunting. She was the most musical person I'd ever met. She was always kind of singing, even as she spoke. It was a musical kind of language. And you see that, I think, in the paintings around you. You see the full, more so than I think any artist I can think of, the full expression of someone's personhood. Like, every Balgo artist has a dotting star. Like, everyone dots. But everyone does it a little bit differently. And you can see for Yubina, it was this process of, over time, after her husband Wimichi died, because they would paint together. If you look at those paintings in that room, even with Ina as well, Undubai, you can see people working on each other's canvases. You can see the great masterpieces of Balgo art always have a grandkid in the corner, you know, or a husband and wife learning, helping each other, because the genius and the masterpiece was family. What people created around these paintings was the ongoing lines of their family. And that's an incredible and invisible and the most important thing about this whole contemporary art world. But you see in Yubina's hand marks, not just this dot where she would sort of scoop the brush in, and you can see the music. Like, you can see the dance of her hand and all that colour just spilling out of her wrists. And you can see her musically chatting away to you when you look at these paintings. And people talk about, you know, Emily, you know, and they talk about the great dots and stuff like that. And actually, like, Emily's a good painter. No, I'm not going to take that away from you, Delan, contemporary. But you see in Emily's paintings the lines, the structure, the scaffolding beneath the yams. And then you see the dotting over the top. And you see those things push and pull throughout her career. What you see in Yubina's works is the complete and utter harmonious fusion of form, structure and expression along with colour. You see an artist completely at one with their brush. There is no hesitation. There is just pure, all of the lines are dots, all of the dots are lines, and the whole country evolves in this music of this composition. And Yubina would just sit down and finish a painting. Unless it was a really, really giant one, hey Jane, she would just sit down, she would come in, have a cup of tea and her Arnott's shortbread thingy, and do it. And then push it aside and walk off and go hunting. Because she'd sung the song. And that was it. That's what you have, is this bright residue of a song staring back at you from the wall. And I find it quite emotional to be in a room of her stuff after so long. But you see, I was just saying to Marielle before, like back, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we were sort of saying, she's kind of the greatest painter around. She's the greatest painter around, isn't she? And we felt that at the time, those of us lucky enough to watch her paint and be with her. And that has only been reinforced for me when I walked in here today. She's still, I think, one of the very great painters that Australia's ever been lucky enough to share their work with us. And that's probably, before I burst into tears, a good moment at which to hand over to you, Undabai, and maybe say some words about your mum and what she taught you.
Yeah, my mother, she told me a lot of things, about painting, how to paint the country, which colors I want to paint, not green, blue, only yellow, red, the sand dunes color, white, the spinifex color, and yellow, the flowers, the seeds that they collect every time. A little bit of black, how they used to grind black seeds, to make damper and all that. They used to collect the seeds, and they grind it and put it in the coals and make comes out a little damper, There was no flour at that time. That's all they had. They had to grind the seeds, collect some bush tomatoes and everything. She told me a lot of things about painting, how to paint the right places, not other people's painting, country. She told me to paint my grandmother's country and her country. Or paint the western side, Canning Stock Road, that area I paint. Sometimes I do Balgo, but I don't do much. I paint most of them Canning Stock Road side. I like doing painting. Sometimes I paint like her. I did a lot of painting, her style, but I did it my way, not her way. And it was good to go back to country, where she walked all the way from Canning Stock Road right up to Sturt Creek. We went on the Canning Stock Road trip right up with Poppy. Followed her footstep all the way down, right up to well 33. A lot of high sand dunes around there, but we made it.
Sometimes easier to walk up them sand dunes than
Yeah.
drive, eh?
Yeah, before we went near a rock, that well, well 36.
Yeah.
I went and stand there and sing out to her, so her spirit can hear me that I'm coming. I was singing out to her, telling her, letting her know, I'm coming for you, to your country. I sing out to my grandmother, grandfather, and mother, and my father. My first one, not with me, yeah. And all my sisters, to let them know that we was coming. Me and Lydia, my niece, letting her know that we was coming. Poppy,
Nyamo?
Nyamo,
Yo. Yo. Thanks in the bay. I guess I came to the Art Centre in 2018, and by that stage, most of the old people had passed away. There's a handful of old people left, or have since passed away in that time that I've been there. But in the Art Centre, you feel that ever presence of people there. In the mornings I walk in and sometimes I'm like, no, hello, I'm back here. Or the weekend, I'm back here, I know. I need to go home. And you feel like you're sitting and really standing on these giant shoulders that have lifted and built this art centre up, and you still every day feel that presence. You feel that old lady sitting there singing and painting. Jane's sitting there and still painting, and Lydia and Rakisha started doing a little bit of painting now, and that continuation, and Genevieve as well, another granddaughter. It continues on despite the old people passing, and that's why there's always that big concern about Aboriginal art falling on its face when the old desert people pass away. But that momentum and that song and that thread continues through the generations. And a big part of what Onabai touched on, a big part of what we've been doing over the last few years, COVID came, and we're already isolated, so everything just shut down. The borders shut, there's no art fairs, there's no exhibitions, none of that. We were sitting around, it's like, okay, well, there's no tourists, no white fellas coming in and out, hardly any services. So we sat around, the directors, artists, and we're like, what are we going to do? What can we do with all of this time that we have? And a big part of it, and a big conversation that we've been having, was we've got to get out on country. There's people, Onabai and her cohort of senior artists now, and they've been painting for Warlayirti for 20, 25, 30 years. And the vast majority of those people have never stepped foot on their ancestral country. There's 8 language groups in Balgo. Balgo is Jaru country, although Gugaja Mob have kind of custodianship over Balgo. So Jaru is the one language in Balgo. There's another 7 languages, and that is country, as you said, far-flung corners of the desert. So people have been painting the same specific tree or specific waterhole or whatever it might be for 20 years. Imagine you painting that one thing and you've only heard about it through story and song and perhaps pictures, but probably not even that. So the that expectation of the art industry, that has to be the next thing that fuels through, which is what these old people wanted when they established the Art Centre, was this access, sharing country with the next generations coming through and having access to getting out on country. So we're like, no one's coming in, no one's distracting us, let's go. So we've had about 7 trips on country. We did the Canning Stock route in June. We went down to Wilkinkara, which John Cuddy came along on. And before that, we went to Walgley, which is the Seven Sisters site into the Great Sandy Desert. And then the years previous, we did a couple of trips out to Sturt Creek, Poroku, Mullen Lake. I'm forgetting, there's been too many now. Tanami Downs, yeah. So just heading, and some of it's a couple of hours down the road, some of it is 3 days drive. The Canning Stock route was 10 days of driving, and there's like 800 sand dunes or something. And I remember one night sitting down, and I was sitting on my swag, and I was just doing this. It felt like you get off a boat and you walk and you've got kind of, and I just felt like I couldn't stop moving after
You
all
got
of those
sandhill sickness.
sandhouse. Yeah, it was incredible. And those kind of moments, you just think people lived out, you know, Onubai's mum, she lived out here, she lived in that spot, and to take 6 cars down the Canning Stock route is so much work and effort and a massive kind of ordeal, whereas this is how people kind of lived. But these trips, reconnecting people with country, taking young people out, and the first trip that we did last year, you know, it was basically Jane and the old people and not many young people. Everyone was a bit like, I don't know what you're doing. That sounds a bit weird, or it's not really for me. But after that first trip and a few others that we had, you know, people get jealous. They get so excited for it. They hear about all the stories, all the turkeys that we got, or the kangaroo, and all the hunting we did, all these incredible waterholes we got to see. We had a helicopter to get to these really remote places that there's not even any kind of goat tracks to get to. Getting to these really incredible places, and that has really, it's just fueled so much excitement for community, and have something that people really feel proud of for the Arts Centre. You know, it's not just sitting down, doing some painting, passing some time, selling a bit, making a bit of pocket money. You know, it's fueling just this real reconnect, and everyone's spirits have just been really lifted in the last couple of years as a result of this. And, you know, I think you read something you said, that this is the direction that art centres should be going in. This is why people paint. This is why the old people painted, so that access to country became possible, so people could go back, you know, and see their place and share it with the next generation and the next generation. And as a result, you know, country comes alive again. When we found Nilla, this waterhole, people hadn't been there for 50 years. No, ranger groups had been on these scouting helicopter trips, and all these people had come to try and look for this one spot. And of course, Balgo Mob come, and we get in the helicopter, not me, but, you know, Balgo Mob get in the helicopter and they find it right away, you know, because Balgo Mob are the best. But we got to this place, Nilla, and in the few days leading up to get there, it was blue skies and everything, and we got to Nilla, and all the clouds come, and it just starts being like thick rain, heavy kind of country, and the same atmosphere. The same thing happened when we went to
Melbourne,
yes. We went to the Seven Sisters site, and in the distance you could see Wangka, which is this incredible rain spot, this epic storms happening. So, you know, country's really coming alive with people getting back to it. Yeah, you feel, you know, this people's spirits are full, and also the spirit of the land is coming back. And as a result of that, people are just doing the most incredible paintings as a result, because they're seeing country, they're walking on country, they're sharing stories with families. You know, when we're at Wilkinkara, we got to link up with Papanyatula, which there's a lot of really strong family connections with the Pintupi Nine mob, and you know, sharing song and sitting down and telling stories. It's just lifted everything, and the paintings and everything as a result is just, yeah, it's been really special. And I think that's the direction that art centres are for. Art centres aren't just a business, art business. They're a business for getting access, country. Yeah. So after we get back from this, we're going to sit down and figure out where we're going next. Which countries are going? Lapi Lapi. That painting that's in the window, that far one, the Alan Windaroo one, that's Lapi Lapi.
we're going there
And we're
next
going to
year.
go. So,
Where to?
Lapi Lapi.
Labi Labi, we've been there.
You went to Lapi Lapi?
Yeah, Canning Stock Road, you know?
No, Lapi Lapi. Wilkinkara side.
Another one.
You were.
Another.
Wilkinkara side, like Walbury country.
That was nearly very
All right.
controversial.
Oh, one big country.
I think it's worth reiterating, though. I know we both said it in a way, and I think I think what is happening at Warlayirti Artists right now is the realisation of a really extraordinary cultural ambition that the whole art market hinges on. Like, the whole art market, the very existence of these paintings hinges on the ambition of desert people to be close to their country and to stay on country, to stay in places like Balgo and not have to live in Halls Creek and not have to live in Alice Springs and not have to live in Broome, to stay on your country and be able to teach your kids because that's who you are. And for Warlayirti artists now to be realising that ambition. I mean, when Yubina was a very successful artist. She was the most successful artist at Balgo. She never had any money. She never had any. She humbugged me for money. She was a wily old woman, but she gave her money to family because that's what you do in the desert, you share. You create country, you create family and countrymen. But she bought cars to go back to country. I think probably Jane, the main thing she did was buy motor cars so she could go hunting and family could go back to country.
Yeah, we did take her up to, 33 Kunawaji.
Yeah.
To see her country.
That's all she wanted. Go visit Wampi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes she'd get a plane. When she was having a good year, she'd just hire a plane and fly herself back down to country. You know? That was like the whole point of painting, was to share it with her family and then be able to... So I think this idea is not trivial. Having returned to country trips is not like a fad that you do during COVID. It's just that Poppy and the artists and the leaders had a chance to realise that ambition. The whole existence of Warlayirti Artists was to do this, was for the Arts Centre and for the art movement to fuel that cultural ambition rather than to fuel the art market. And I think that takes a bit of thinking. That's something really worth contemplating because it's a really radical business model and it's an extraordinary act of cultural genius to harness the resources of the art market to your own destiny, you know, as a desert person. And around you in this room is the evidence of the greatest practitioner of that craft that I think there's been. She was the best. She still is the best.
I think that's, sorry, I'm so, yeah, it's quite emotional actually, watching you, you know, I feel like it, I just wanted to say thank you so much for bringing this exhibition to life, but actually you've both said, well, all of you have said that, and it's a reminder of that art centres aren't for the market. You've made that point. They're actually for artists. And I mean, these incredible bush trips, like you're essentially, I mean, you're taking, like the art centre closes down so that everyone can go on bush trips, but that's closes down.
We have I'll just say, we do have two fantastic arts workers who over the course of the last kind of couple of years, we've got their confidence enough that we don't actually have to shut down now. So two local workers that run the art centre for a week, 2 weeks, whatever. They do sales, they do all of that. So, you know, at the beginning it was kind of shutting down, but we've actually managed to put in place so that, you know, other people can keep playing. But yeah, it takes a big chunk of time out of the ordinary operations. And a lot of other art centre managers have, you know, you go to different events and you talk with them, you know, how do you do it? Or how do you have the stock or to keep selling and keep doing that sort of thing? But it actually pays off because people are more excited and are devoting more time. They're spending, when they are in the art centre, they're spending more time there and are more productive as a result of their experience and what they've taken from country and pouring that into the practice in the art centre. And then we've also had, you know, a huge uptake of young people that are painting now, and a few men that have come out, you know, that have otherwise, I've hardly ever seen them in all the years that I've been in Balgo. But then all of a sudden they come, you know, 2 days before the bush trip, they're like, I'm coming on this, I can't wait. You know, I get to see my country. I've never been there before. And then they come back from that trip and give me a board, give me canvas, I want to paint that now. So it's it's just, Rex, and it's brought this whole new energy to the place, despite it taking a lot of time out from,
I think, it's for other art centres to actually follow that model would be amazing, I suppose. Like, I mean, many art centres, I know that going on bush trips does seem like this huge, massive effort, and it takes a lot of time, and you're taking artists away from the thing, but the energy, as you said, that comes back into the people's painting, and that, I was wondering, like, Jane, do you paint differently after going out to country? Do you come back and look at your paintings in a different way?
When we go bush trip, we went on bush trip, but we was doing some little bit of painting at near the well, well 33.
Well, we had that big one canvas, remember?
Yeah.
That Canning Stock Group
Yeah,
one.
we was doing a canning stock or whatever, the big road, how we start from 51 right up to well 33, Well, yeah. The big road and all the sand dunes we done, and all the water holes. I think we finished it off already.
It's a great, and this big collaborative, we had Jane and some of the old people, and then that next generation painting, and then even some, young girls that were sitting around doing that painting, and that's learning from such a young age, doing a few dots, adding their little piece to the story, that kind of development and learning from an age of just how, as you said, you look at any old Balgo painting or any Balgo painting, you've got a corner of, a grandkid that's done that work, and that's how people learn, and it fuels. And on the other art centres, we've been kind of talking, art centres just shouldn't operate in silos. They're not, there's so much family connection between the different art centres. So on this trip to Wilkinkara, we had Papunyatula artists came. I'm in conversations with a few Western Desert art centres, Jalalii, Warrakoona, Junpi, to do a trip next year where the Western Desert mob can kind of get together. And we even, the coordinator that's at Papunyatula at the moment, we were talking during this camp, being like, imagine if we got, Marty Millie, Papunyatula, all of the Western Desert art centres together, and we all get together and just did this, huge thing. And actually, and laid it out to everyone really clearly, what, like the Nuro Walmajara canvas did for native title, but to tell that incredible story of how interconnected, everyone is. I think this is how, at the moment, art centres, they're funded through arts, visual arts, and sales. But art centres are health, social and emotional well-being, country, land management, all of that stuff is encompassed in painting. So there really needs to be a real reshift of how art centres are looked, the importance of art centres, and as a result, funding bodies, government, philanthropy, whatever it is, need to kind of, redevelop the narrative of how they're supported and funded. Because those are kind of initial trips that we did, we had a lot of out-of-pocket expenses. We've since connected with GMAC, which is Granite Mines Affected Area, so it's kind of the feel-good fund for, for mining, which that's how Maru Mili managed to do a lot of their on-country stuff, because they have a huge on-country program, and that's through BHP. So, in whatever avenue it comes from, there needs to be this real look at what art centres do. Proved during COVID, art centres basically kept communities safe and going, whether that's through, I know some art centre managers told me stories of them having to go around in all the PPE and test everyone in community because there was no clinic management or staff, or whether it was getting paints and everything organised so that people had stuff to do at home, or sending out food boxes or whatever it is. Art centres kept all of that afloat, and we didn't see any extra money from the government for keeping things going, or there's a huge dependence on not only for community members, a huge dependence and reliance and safety and trust in art centres. There's a whole lot of government mob that are fly in, fly out, that come into art centres and use the knowledge of elders, use the resources and the time of management. So, yeah, art centres, they keep things going.
Did you get that?
It's recorded, so that's
good. Let your friends know, let all the people let you know.
Yeah. That's why it's so amazing to have you all here, because, I mean, being in Melbourne, we are so disconnected from what actually is happening, on country and in art centres. I mean, we're here in this beautiful gallery, which we're incredibly proud of, but it really doesn't, it means so much more. It brings everything to life when, you can come in here and you can actually speak from country, from 20-year history with Balgo, from what's happening currently, from family connections. It's really incredible, and we feel so privileged. Like, on behalf of Deland Contemporary, I just want to thank you so much for coming. It's honestly it's you breathing life into this exhibition, and so can everyone just join me in thanking our incredibly special guests. Thank you.